Welcome back to Echo Ridge and our maximum difficulty achievement run. Today, we're going nuclear. Nuclear. I don't know. Let me know how you pronounce it in the comments below. You may have noticed that I've been cleaning this area of the colony out for probably 3 or 4 episodes, and there's a good reason for it. This is going to be the spot of our industrial sauna / nuclear power brick. Yes. The idea is that we're going to use one of these research reactors to generate a whole bunch of heat. That heat is going to power a bunch of steam turbines, and that's pretty much going to check power right off the books. Additionally, it may allow us to go into the radbolt engine and start using it as our initial means of transpiration in and around the star map. There's also a couple of radiation-related achievements that we're going to need. First, the GMA OK, which is going to require us to analyze just about every plant in the game after it's been mutated by radiation. The second is the That's Rad achievement, which the only thing it takes is running a research reactor at full capacity for 5 cycles. In preparation for this massive project, we've been sending over a lot of materials, starting with 60 tons worth of copper ore. We're also going to be sending over about 100 tons worth of sandstone. We've managed to automate this process a little bit by putting in the storage bins and having the duplicants bring all the sandstone to the storage bins, but then it's the auto sweeper that takes the materials and loads up the conveyor loader. This is a big improvement from the manual way because the conveyor rail can only transport 20 kilos per second. So after the duplicants load up the conveyor loader the first time, they then just keep coming back and dropping off 20, 40, or 60 kilo loads, which is incredibly inefficient. The first thing we're going to need to do is actually unlock the research reactor. It is stuck behind Tier 4 research. Lucky for us, we have some spare databanks. In fact, we have 41 on the main colony. So we'll grab our virtual planetarium, throw it down right here inside of our lab, hook it up with power, and that should be that. Also, in preparation for this large project, we have been refining a lot of materials. But the sort of great thing about our water system that we put in last time means this brine is never heating up. All the coolant that is provided to it gets re-chilled by the thermal aqua tuner and steam turbine setup. So as funny as it is, we really wouldn't need an industrial sauna if we only needed to put a metal refinery in it. Looks like Eilard is about to finish up on the research reactor. Great job. We now have access to the research reactor, uranium centrifuge, and the radbolt joint plate. The only one we really care about is the research reactor, because we're going to get our enriched uranium from the wonderful bees. Right now, this beta hive has about 4.5 tons worth of enriched uranium. It takes 10 kilos worth of enriched uranium to run a research reactor for 1 cycle, which means we have enough in this one hive for about 440 cycles. Pretty good, but not 100% of where we need. Additionally, getting the ice cream scoop and getting some enriched uranium out of the hive is also another achievement. But we have to make sure we do it without getting stung. Finally, I'd like to reactivate this beta hive. Right now, it's still 45 degrees over here. This one is about minus 30. And the betas and the beta hive have to be in sub-zero temperatures. So considering this area is still much colder than this one, I want to make sure this hive is healthy, just in case this one ends up failing in the future. Speaking of which, there's some other things we want to be able to do down here, but once again, we have to make sure we're not going to be getting stung. That's where all this beautiful carbon dioxide is going to come into play. So step 1, I'm just going to let some of this carbon dioxide fill up this cavern and put all these wonderful betas to sleep. While they're doing that, I think I found a decent way to get all the way over here without destroying too much of the uranium ore. And it involves going up through here. There's some uranium, but it's not too shabby. Then all we have to do is keep digging through and then start building these ladders and we'll be good. And since we'll be in here to get rid of all this snow, we might as well improve the ability for the betas to make uranium. And by doing this, the bee tinies will realize, oh, well, this beta hive is in its own room, and this room doesn't have a beta hive, so they're going to plant one, probably right here. Apparently, some of the bees really like to be asleep, because this one flew all the way up here to grab uranium ore from here. So to prevent that, I'm going to put a door here. The plan is working out perfectly. There's enough carbon dioxide in here that the betas are quickly going to sleep. The faster it drains, the longer the betas are going to be able to sleep, which is going to be good because I want to get in and out of there before they wake up again. In fact, it might be better if I just go through here. That way the ladder can come down like this, and then I'll be able to put a bunch of hives indoors right over here. So far, there's not enough carbon dioxide here. We're gonna fix that right now. This carbon dioxide we've been storing up for quite some time. The same sort of thing that I was doing here in anticipation of wanting to put these bees to sleep. Work over here has been completed, so we are ready to unentomb this beta hive. Now, there is a lot of carbon dioxide in here, so as the bee tinies turn into betas, it's gonna put them to sleep. At least until all this carbon dioxide is drained. In fact, I don't want to put a pneumatic door there. I want to put a manual airlock. It looks like this is a perfect opportunity, so we're going to try to sneak in here and grab a bunch of the enriched uranium. Quickly, Mason Lord. Quickly. Don't get stung. Okay, run. Run. No. Disable auto harvest. Get out of there. And there it is. We got the achievement without getting stung. Be careful, Patrick. I don't love the way that bee is looking at you. 4.5 tons of enriched uranium. We'll go ahead and sweep that up. And then we'll disable auto harvest on the beta hive and come back when there's another 5 tons. Next, we're installing the additional bays for the beta hives and putting an automatic dispenser right about here. This way, any uranium ore that we get, say from the meteors hitting the planetoid, or anything else we've dug out, we can then drop in this automatic dispenser and feed it to the betas. The reason you want to do this is because the beta hives are able to convert 10 kilos of uranium ore into 9 kilos of enriched uranium. That's a 90% efficiency. Compared to this to the garbage that is the uranium centrifuge, not only does it require 480 watts, it only gives you 2 kilos worth of enriched uranium for 10 kilos of uranium ore, or a 20% efficiency rate. I suppose while we're over here in this one, before there's any bees over here, we might as well go grab the enriched uranium out of this hive as well. That'll give us another 170 cycles. So already, just by using our environment, we're gonna be good till about cycle 1100. Yeah, I think that'll work. I've always found it a little bit disturbing how the bee tinies turn into a beta hive. Like, you can still see their face. I almost forgot to open all the doors. That would have made the design a little problematic. If we were to leave them closed, the bee tinies couldn't get in the room, nor could the bees drop off what they needed to. Here we have 6 tons of uranium ore, and the duplicates are now dropping it off right in front of the bees, and that's going to give us another 600 cycles worth of enriched uranium. And the bees haven't even started working up over here. This area is now complete, but like we said before, it's going to take a while for them to eat all of that carbon dioxide, although they do consume it pretty quickly at 100 grams per second. But this area over here is going to be able to produce us a lot more enriched uranium. We even have it sort of opened up here, so as the carbon dioxide does fall, yeah, it'll put the bees to sleep for a minute, but it's really eating through that carbon dioxide. Now's on the subject of building the nuclear power plant. For those of you who've never seen one of these, they produce a lot of radiation. We'll highlight exactly how much in the future. But just to give you a quick idea, if we were to put the reactor, say, right here, radiation would spill out of it almost 15 tiles away from its center in a 365-degree pattern. So it'd be something like a range of this. And anywhere in that circle is definitely not a place where dupes need to be going. So keeping that in mind, we're actually going to put the research reactor way over here. So half of its radiation is spilling off screen and not bothering us much at all. With that in mind, we're also going to try to put it up as high as possible, keeping in mind that we're eventually going to want to put some space guns up here, so we're going to leave space for them. So I'm thinking right about here is going to be perfect for the reactor. Now, the reactor itself doesn't have an overheat temperature, so you can make it out of almost any of your refined materials, just keeping in mind that those materials still have a melting point. The next aspect to think about is the steam turbines required to run this. You're going to want a significant amount of steam turbines, which sort of dictates how wide this is going to be. I think in this particular design, I'm going to try to get away with 9 steam turbines. Now, this does not look like much yet. Give me a few minutes to put down some of the basic bones, and it'll be a lot easier to see then. Some other minor updates that we're doing around the colony while that big project is going on is we've rerouted all the heavy watt wire to be around this tank. That way we can get in here, get rid of all of it, and then finally seal this up proper like. Previously, we had a heavy watt joint plate there, which meant all the heat coming from out of here was escaping out in here. And while it's a lot better than it was last episode, it's still definitely not the way we want to do it. We also added another pip wrench because I wanted to make sure that we had a dirt positive colony, and while I think we were close, when you take into account all the sleet wheat and then all the mealwoods for the Drecos, just to be safe, we put in another ranch. Oh, don't worry about this, it's just a little radiation vomiting. We also had to turn rad pills back on. Because we're working in the vacuum of space, there tends to be a lot of radiation, especially on this planetoid. Here's our basic framework. We still have a lot of work to do. We're going to have a single liquid lock in here because this is exposed to the vacuum of space, so we don't really have to worry about heat transfer from one side to the other. We left in the wonderful table, that way the duplicants who were working inside the sauna had a nice place to take a break. I mean, look at that delicious fruit basket. Am I the only one who wonders where they found bananas and grapes? And if you remember, what I said earlier about the research reactor is 25 tiles away from the center of the reactor is sort of the no-go zone for duplicants. Hence the reason the last accessible level is going to be this row here. Well, at least for right now. Because unfortunately, because this is all exposed to the vacuum of space, I have to put in a whole lot of drywall or backing in here. Give me a minute to put all these down. I think we're going to end up using sedimentary rock only because we have 285 tons of it. Which I'm sure this choice is going to generate a lot of questions in the comments below. Hey Echo, why aren't you using temperature shift plates? Why are you only using drywall? And well, it's a simple matter of materials. We just don't have enough materials to go around. This is already going to be a very expensive project. Let the record show it's cycle 569. See how long this one's going to take, shall we? So I've been sitting here staring at this for about 20 minutes, and I realized something. My steam turbines are not symmetrical. This one only has a 3-tile gap. The rest of them have 4. Okay, that's a little better. And now it is cycle 612. Easy peasy. Some of the changes I made while designing it is I decided to put all the steam turbines in their own sort of atmosphere, which then necessitated that I needed insulated tiles to stop the heat from going from this side to this side. A couple of things we need to do is bring some oxygen up there. That's easy enough. And then we need to make sure we're going to have a nice cooling loop. Otherwise, all these steam turbines would end up overheating. We're going to have 2 thermal aqua tuners in the sauna. One is going to be responsible for keeping 5 steam turbines cool, and one is going to be responsible for keeping 4 turbines cool. Now, one thing I'm going to need to work on while the duplicants are doing these last little touches is a liquid lock. We don't care much because this area is normally vacuumed out. The only time it's not is when this door here opens. So we're going to make sure no one else can come through here. Now, whenever the door opens, the oxygen's going to flood out this way, and there's enough of a vacuum in the way to where we shouldn't get any atmosphere here. But we still need a liquid lock that is going to be able to go up to 150, maybe even 200 degrees. And we really don't have any liquid that can do that quite yet. So we actually have to make one. And I'm going to beg all of you, please don't do this at home. This is not a good idea, but it just so happens that we have 58 tons worth of plastic and a little steam room that may get hot enough to be able to melt it. But what we're going to have to do in order to make sure this room heats up a little bit more is disable the steam turbine, because plastic will not melt until 159 degrees. And right now, it's only 155 degrees in here. So we'll disable our steam turbine. We're turning off our thermal aqua tuner until the plastic temperature shift plate is complete. It is already 178 degrees in here. And as soon as Dave finishes that temperature shift plate, it should start absorbing some of the temps from in here. You can see the temperature of the steam room is getting lower. The temperature of the shift plate is getting higher, and we've now gotten to a point where the steam in the room is getting too cool. So we turn the aqua tuner back on, and then just wait for this temperature shift plate to melt. 115, and the aqua tuner's at 250. Now the aqua tuner is getting closer to 300 degrees, so we're going to turn it back off and let this room cool down a bit. But by then, we should have one melted temperature shift plate. And look at this! Naphtha! We're going to have to pick it up from everywhere. And it's 100 and something degrees, but it's going to be perfect. We'll do this 2 or 3 times to make sure we have enough naphtha to fill the lock. A little bit of overheat damage here and there, but look, we had to make the naphtha somewhere. All said and done, it only took 2 temperature shift plates because naphtha has a full tile of liquid at 730 kilos. Now, unfortunately, even though this was all open to space, there's still a little bit of polluted oxygen in here, and oh my goodness, how are you guys out without your suits on? I rebuilt this door because it was overheating due to the naphtha and forgot to put the emissions back on it. But as I was saying before ONI things happened, unfortunately there's a little bit of gas in here. Looks like it's about 338 micrograms, so we're getting ready to plug in this gas pump just to get rid of it all. That wasn't too bad, we already have a vacuum. Get rid of this gas pump and all the pipes, and now we need to have a conversation about coolant and steam pressure. The research reactor requires coolant at all times, otherwise it'll just explode. And if you're interested in seeing what that looks like, I did an entire tutorial on everything to do with radiation, including the research reactor. I'll put a link up there in the corner. Additionally, if at any time there is too much steam pressure in here, and the research reactor cannot vent, it again will explode. If you feed it anything other than a water-based liquid, like water, polluted water, salt water, again, it will explode. I'm sure you're getting the point by now that they just like to explode. So how you handle the water coming in versus the steam going out is a very delicate operation. For us, these 5 steam turbines are always going to be taking water out. Likewise, we're always going to have 1 liquid pipe coming in. So this will be 10 kilos of water coming in, and this will be 10 kilos of water going out. These 4 steam turbines are going to take all their condensed steam and keep it inside the sauna. You might be wondering how we're going to be bringing it in. Well, we're going to be grabbing all the salt water from this pump and sending it in here. The piping is going to be a little bit spaghetti-like. Because we don't want to lose any of the potential water by either of these vents, we need to make sure if this has enough water, we're going to have to send it all the way back here to this system. Additionally, we're also going to have a backup just in case something ever happens to this line. These steam turbines, instead of sending their water outside of the sauna, will keep it in and supply all that water right back to the research reactor. It is bridged on, and that way this line will have priority. So you might be wondering, well then Echo, why don't you just add a certain amount of water to the sauna and just let these 5 steam turbines provide all the water for the research reactor? And the reason why, like many of you were talking about in the comments of the last video, wouldn't it be great if we didn't have to desalinate the water? So in this case, this whole sauna is going to be doing it for us. All right, I hope you're a little hungry because we're about to go over the entire piping system, and it's a big bowl of spaghetti. The research reactor takes in coolant. That coolant is being sourced from these 12 buffer tanks. The buffer tanks are being sourced by this saltwater geyser and this saltwater geyser. They both are heading directly into those buffer tanks and are no longer stopping and dropping off the water here. You'll see why in a little bit. When we turn on the research reactor, it's going to make a lot of steam, specifically by dropping off some very hot nuclear waste and steam, which are going to fall all the way down to this saltwater. Once the steam is going, these steam turbines are going to attempt to fill this line here. If they can't, it's going to bypass this bridge and head all the way down, all the way across the base, and then into our original water tank, where it'll then be cooled. Oh my goodness, I forgot to turn this back on. The reason why this system is set up is because if this line for some reason ever goes dry, or if some irresponsible content creator accidentally snips the line coming in, these steam turbines will then take all the existing steam, condense it, and then start feeding it to the reactor. That way it won't, melt down. Remember, this is not a big tank. So what's happening to that water when all these buffer tanks are full? Well, the buffer tanks have an overflow system as well, and it's right here. Once all 12 buffer tanks are full, the water bypasses the buffer tanks and then heads over to the saltwater tank. Now, because we have so much water on this planetoid, I don't know if we're ever going to truly be able to use all of it. Because as you can see, this tank is already full, And so are these buffer tanks, which means we have a potential to lose water once this geyser becomes overpressured. I mean, even this tank is chock full. Oh my gosh, gave up. What are you doing? Gave up is trying to deliver enriched uranium into the research reactor. I set this pneumatic door here just to make sure duplicants couldn't come in. I am not ready for the reactor to start yet. Gave up, maybe we can stop you from doing that? There's no enriched uranium in here. Oh, wow. That was a close one. Woo! That would have ended poorly. While the reactor does have coolant, the steam turbine coolant loop is not finished quite yet. We're also going to be measuring the steam pressure inside the room by use of a wonderful atmosensor. The reason why is because these steam turbines will have the potential to output 10 kilos of water per second, whereas the research reactor is not going to be able to use 10 kilos per second. So anytime the sauna falls below 20 kilos worth of steam pressure, this automation sensor is going to detect it, send a green signal to the liquid shutoff, which will then divert all of the coolant to stay inside the sauna. And in this case, we're going to be dropping it right down here because that's exactly where the research reactor is going to drop all of its nuclear waste. I think we're ready to load up the coolant loops and do all sorts of checks for some misplaced bridges. I've heard rumors that sometimes bridges get flipped on this channel. We'll fill the bottom line first. We made sure the aqua tuner could not turn on, so it should be a pretty easy fill up. And then we'll extend this line temporarily just to be able to fill this top loop up as well. Well, the coolant lines are in. We haven't turned the aqua tuners on quite yet because, well, it's still a vacuum in here. The coolant loops are flowing in the right direction and all the bridges look correct. Got one! This liquid shutoff is flipped. We've moved on from bridges. This is why you double check everything before starting a huge project like that. And you also save. So I suppose it's time to start this whole thing up, especially considering our large power transformer is up to 175 degrees. The coolant's in. Now all we have to do is provide the conveyor receptacle with a source of enriched uranium. We have a little system down here. All the enriched uranium gets dropped off into this storage bin, and then it'll be loaded into this conveyor loader. We can just say manufactured material, enriched uranium, and make sure the conveyor loader is one priority higher than the storage bin, and the auto sweeper does its job. Speaking of the enriched uranium, because this episode's been going on for so long, yeah, we had 6 tons before, but now each one of these beta hives has about a ton. There's 870 kilos, there's 1,000, there's 870. So as long as this thing works well, power and radiation are no longer going to be an issue. And just in case, we're going to save one more time, and then all we have to do to turn the reactor on is flip this switch. Now the research reactor itself is made out of copper. It doesn't have an overheat temperature. So as long as the room doesn't hit the melting point of copper, which is 1,000 degrees, we're okay. Here comes that little bit of nuclear waste right now, dropping right into the water. The water is up to about 70 degrees. But don't you worry, the research reactor is cooking that salt water very quickly. It's not going to take long at all. And here's the example of the reactor not using 10 kilos per second, because once the reactor has enough coolant, it stops the flow, uses the coolant, dumps it, and then accepts some more. Oh, there it goes. Looks like it's starting to rain. I know I'm going to get some more questions about why we didn't put temperature shift plates in here. And it was just a matter of time and materials. This is going to be so very hot anyways. I'm not too worried about it. At least for now. And now for the moment I know everybody's waiting to see. Kablamo! Right next to the reactor, it's about 12,000 rads per cycle. Down here, we're at about 500 rads per cycle. And this is exactly 24 tiles as previously described. So as long as we stay in this area, we should be okay. Something that we can do in the future to improve the usable space is by adding a bunch of lead tiles right under the reactor. Once we do that, as long as we're letting that nuclear waste fall, we'll have no problem using up more material here in the sauna. For now though, I just love the stun factor of all that radiation. So how are we going to capitalize on that radiation? Well, the same way we would in this situation, with a radbolt generator. Except the great thing is we can put the radbolt generator right next to all these rads. Now granted, the duplicant's going to get sick for just a little bit, and I know what you're thinking. Echo, why didn't you do this before the reactor was on? Well, because I forgot. But remember, duplicant safety is our #1 priority. So we're going to make sure the duplicant has a wonderful rad pill that it's going to be able to absorb 100 rads per cycle. Unfortunately, in this spot right here, we're going to be getting 836 rads per cycle, and that's by using 1 radbolt generator. We're actually going to be using 2. Look at Sulfur's absorbed rad dose. Sorry, buddy. Alright, we have something called extreme radiation sickness. I've never seen it before, but apparently Eric has it. It causes -6 to athletics, -75% to stamina, and -30% of bathroom use speed. And of course, they're going to be vomiting for a long time. Their total absorbed dose right now is only 225, so they'll be fine in just a couple of cycles. But for that wonderful effort, we're getting 365 rads per cycle out of each generator. I think we could be getting a lot more, but you'll notice this granite block is blocking 56% of the rads right here on this line. So we're actually going to change that block out with a mesh tile, because the mesh tile doesn't block any radiation. It looks like the steam is finally taking hold. All the drywall is slowly heating up. Angry? I understand you're hurrying, buddy, but trust me, you want to get out of here really soon. 220, 250, there you go, 278, 302. You're going to be fine. Oh my goodness. Apparently they can catch so much radiation that it'll incapacitate them. Wow, that's taking one for the team, huh? Lucky for us, Angry Forest was brought over to the treehouse cot just in the nick of time. They're going to make a full recovery. No hard feelings, right, buddy? Yeah, that's the spirit. On a more serious note, though, that's probably the last time that was going to need to happen. Because remember, the duplicants will have no business to do up here. Look at all these wonderful radbolts we're getting, though. About 1,400 per cycle. You also might be wondering how we're getting the radbolts out. Well, that has to do with some ingenious corner building. We've kept this corner off and this corner off, so that the radbolt can fly right through it. Now, right now, that radbolt's just going off into the ether because we don't have anything set up to receive it quite yet. But we'll be able to put radbolt reflectors here and direct where we want those radbolts for sure. The last thing we're going to have to do is get rid of the nuclear waste, because as you can see, it sort of collects pretty quickly. Now, nuclear waste itself is not going to be very useful for us. It has a freezing point of 26.9, a thermal conductivity of 6, and a specific heat capacity of 7. It also has some radioactive effects. So, just a moment ago, 2 things happened. 1, we earned a couple of achievements. 2, I realized that my cool little enclosures that we made for the steam turbines is actually blocking one of the inputs. Considering it's 4 steam turbines, that means there's 4 inputs blocked, which is almost a full steam turbine. How did I just now catch this? I've been recording for about 140 cycles. I could smush everything over by 1 tile, but between all the power and all the piping, I don't know if that's worth it. But everything's working sort of the way it's supposed to. Radbolts are being generated. All the steam is being condensed into water, is correctly bypassing the right bridges, and because there's more than 20 kilos worth of steam pressure in here, all that water is heading off to this tank right here. Some potential problems I can see in the future is if this tank gets too full and stops accepting water, all the steam here will build up and these steam turbines won't be able to vent. So what we're probably going to do is something that most of you are really going to hate, and it has to do with our nuclear waste. We're going to be taking all of this nuclear waste and just dumping it into the vacuum of space. And we can sort of do the same thing with the water. If any time this starts to get backed up and is not able to flow, it's going to bypass the bridge and also go to the vacuum of space. I know it's a huge waste, but unless I'm willing to put in another 15 liquid reservoirs, which I'm not because they're 400 kilos worth of metal ore each, this just sort of works. Now, without further ado, let's see what colony achievements we earned. Radical trip, have radbolts travel a cumulative 10 kilometers, and that's rad. Run a research reactor at full capacity for 5 cycles. I was considering shifting all the steam turbines over by 1, and then I realized I'm going to have to turn off the reactor to do that. Now that I know that you can actually irradiate your dupes to death, we should probably not do that. And to turn the reactor off, all we do is turn the auto sweeper off. Then the auto sweeper will no longer be able to deliver any fuel to the research reactor. So after it gets done using up all the enriched uranium, it would turn off. Additionally, you can use the fuel delivery control automation on the reactor itself to only enable fuel delivery once per cycle. For me, it's no big deal to do it either way. With all 9 steam turbines running flat out, well, the best they can with one of the inputs blocked, it's time to hook this spine here up to our main power spine. Lucky for us, I've already cleared out the path. We can just go up and then all the way over. The spine connection goes all the way down to the transformers and then plugs into what's soon going to be made irrelevant by 9 steam turbines, all producing 850 watts per second. I put a battery up here just in case we wanted to get a little tricky with some of the automation, turning off and on the steam turbines when we needed to. But based on the temps I'm seeing, I don't want to mess with it much. We've got about 218 degrees at the top, about 214 degrees at the bottom, and in the middle about 240. The only other change I put in is I added a couple of metal tiles here. That way the nuclear waste would fall and hit it first, as well as the overflow water, and that way it had a small opportunity to sort of cool into the environment so it wouldn't overheat this liquid pump. Eventually that'll be mitigated even more once we have time and the materials to put temperature shift plates all through the bottom here. But you have to remember, we're going to only be adding more heat into this system by use of things like metal refineries, glass forges, and eventually even a molecular forge. Okay, this is driving me batty. I have to fix this. Give me another 20 cycles. Because of the limitation of where the radbolt reflectors are coming through, I think it's easier to push the sauna out one tile to the left than it is to bring all the steam turbines one tile to the right. The research reactor is powered down, so now is the opportunity to get in there and do any changes that need to be done that we happen to have discovered once we turned it on. I'm going to start by putting some automation on the radbolt reactors, just because I think it's smart. About the most complicated thing to shift over is going to be the liquid lock, especially considering we don't want anything else coming out. But long story short, you sort of got to build it back in one side at a time to smush all the naphtha over to make sure everything is protected. Look at this! We're just about there. Now all we have to do is deconstruct this tile, and we have our new lock in the precise position that we wanted. Okay, I've learned the error in my ways. I was in here doing the good work, and I had to unlock this door so the duplicants can come in, and so what they do? They loaded the reactor back up with more uranium, which means you have to wait until all that uranium is spent. Hence the reason it probably is better to put the automation directly on the reactor. We're going to fix that now as well. And just to make sure they don't load the reactor, I'm going to try putting it on priority 0 so no one will touch it. Here's our new and updated system that I think I'll finally be happy with. All the enriched uranium comes in here through the rail, and then it hits this conveyor meter. This conveyor meter is set to 10 units. Well, a unit in oxygen not included, at least as far as the conveyor meter is concerned, is 1 kilo. So as you can see, the conveyor meter says, hey, I've reached my limit, and there is only 10 kilos worth of enriched uranium inside the conveyor receptacle. Now, all we have to do to reset that is send a green signal to this input right here. To do that, some folks like to use the cycle sensor. I'm partial to the timer sensor. And then all we do is send the conveyor meter a green signal for 1 second out of every cycle. This will reset the conveyor meter, allow 10 more kilos to pass, and that 10 kilos will be fed to our research reactor. And in this way, we know when we do power off the reactor and say, hey, don't take any more fuel, we know that it's only going to take at most 1 full cycle for the research reactor to power down, because at any time, it's only going to have 10 kilos inside of it. Additionally, we added another radbolt generator, because the only thing better than 1500 radbolts per cycle is 2200. And now we can control them just by use of a switch. The last thing I'm going to try is to make more room for these steam turbines. There's a small problem though. I know this tile would be open to the vacuum, but I'm not sure if these tiles here are considered open to the vacuum, so we're going to find out. And it looks like they are not considered open to the vacuum because as you can see, the oxygen pressure is rising. If this were a vacuum right here, the oxygen pressure would be going down. So this gives us an awesome opportunity to add 1 more steam turbine, because I'll be able to squish them all over by 1 tile. This makes me a lot happier. We now have 6 steam turbines on top and the 4 on the side for a total of 10 steam turbines. This last steam turbine is going to output to this vent here, because remember, each steam turbine produces 2 kilos of water at max, so the most you can have on one single line is 5. And it looks like we're ready to go. All the steam turbines have been fixed on the side, and we even have more room for another power transformer, you know, just in case we wanted to add another 4 radbolt generators. So all we need to do to turn it back on is lock the door and flip the switch. In the course of this episode, I've let the meteors continuously pile up, and the rumors of them getting bigger are true. But look at all the wonderful uranium they've dropped off. We are already up to another 3 tons of uranium ore. All we have to do to capture all that is do a nice sweep command after we've dug it out, and once again the duplicates will drop it off at this automatic dispenser. And the bees, they know exactly what to do with it. I'm going to be leaving these meteors to pile up top here until we get the space guns, because naturally they're going to form a barrier and we won't have to worry too much about the meteors coming down in here and cracking this. It wouldn't be too big of a deal because eventually it'd only break 1 tile before we were able to repair it. But getting the duplicates up there to repair it, well, let's just say we'd have to give them maybe a double dose of the rad pills. Some of the neat things I wanted to show you about the research reactor before we ended up calling it for an episode is this cool little meter right here on the left is the coolant meter. You can see it start to drop and then the pipes refill it with water. Additionally, this is the meter of how much enriched uranium it has. All said and done, with the reactor going for just a couple cycles, we're up to about 190 degrees up here, not too bad. And it's pretty stable because we're at around 180, 190 down here as well. The hottest parts are where the nuclear fallout hits, and that's right here on these tiles. But we also have some of the water overflow heading over there as well. We ended up moving this liquid shutoff because every once in a blue moon this area might spike beyond 275, and we don't want this to overheat. By the way, with all the power being produced by these wonderful steam turbines, yeah, our battery just sort of sits at 20 kilojoules. It doesn't move. All the hydrogen ends up backing up in the gas reservoir, which then triggers our system here that says, nope, we don't care if you don't need the power, we need you to burn the hydrogen. So I think it's fair to say that power is solved, at least for the foreseeable future. We're sitting at 10.1 tons of enriched uranium, so without going back to the beta hives, we're good for 1,000 cycles. And by then, I'm sure the betas will have plenty of more enriched uranium. I know letting all the nuclear waste vent into the vacuum of space is gonna trigger some folks. So let me know what you would do with it in the comments below. Of all the systems I've built in the past, this nuclear brick might be one of my favorites. So I'm also looking forward to hearing what you have to say about it. Until next time, happy gaming, and I'll talk to you soon.